The great council chamber, suspended in the void of deep space, was alive with an alien hum, the collective energy of thousands of minds processing, debating, and deciding. It was an ancient place, built by civilizations older than most stars in the galaxy. A vast sphere of pulsating light hovered at the center of the room, casting shifting hues across the faces of the assembled representatives. The chamber was filled with beings of all shapes, sizes, and forms, creatures whose very existence defied human understanding. At the far end of the chamber, the leader of the Enkril, the amphibious species known for their towering figures, bioluminescent skin, and highly sophisticated technological advancements, rose to speak. His name was Qorax, and his voice rumbled with authority. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council, the time has come for us to act," Qorax began, his deep, resonant voice echoing through the chamber. "We have long observed the primitive species known as humans. They are weak, unrefined, and yet they possess resources in abundance. Resources we can harness for our own progress." He waved his massive hand toward the sphere of light at the center of the chamber, which flickered to life and displayed an image of Earth, a pale blue dot set against the vast black expanse of space. The planet looked peaceful, almost idyllic, with its swirling clouds and vast oceans. "The humans are no threat to us," Qorax continued. "Their technologies are inferior, and their social structures are fractured. They have the potential to be molded, to serve our greater purpose. I propose that we take what is rightfully ours." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some species were already leaning forward in interest, their multi-lensed eyes fixed on the image of Earth. Others, however, appeared less convinced. A tall, angular figure at the far side of the room, representing the Sivriks, a race of sentient artificial intelligences, spoke next. "Qorax, the Sivriks representative, Unit Z-15, said in a mechanical yet eerily calm voice, 'You speak of Earth as though it is a simple resource to be exploited. But have you considered the broader implications of enslaving an entire species? The humans, while technologically inferior to us, are highly creative. Their minds are unpredictable. There is a risk in treating them as property.' The Sivriks were known for their logical reasoning and highly structured thought processes. For millennia, their advanced artificial intelligence had ruled sectors of the galaxy, organizing complex networks and systems that many races had come to depend on. Yet, the Sivriks also understood something that few others did: the unknown, the wild spark of creation that could not be quantified. Qorax's large eyes narrowed. "I have considered this. The humans are no more dangerous than any other species we have conquered. They will be bent to our will. We will use them for our own benefit, as we have done with countless others." But not all the species in the room agreed. A quiet voice interrupted the conversation. The Zothari, a race of insectoid creatures that communicated through a collective hive mind, had remained silent thus far. But now, a representative from their hive spoke up. "Enslaving a species is not as simple as it seems, Qorax," the Zothari representative, a voice without a body, said. "We have learned this from experience. We, too, once believed that we could dominate a weaker species, but the unpredictable nature of sentient beings is not to be underestimated." This was the first time the Zothari had expressed concern. They had always been a ruthless species, expanding their empire by manipulating weaker civilizations, extracting their genetic material for their own hive. But they had learned, through costly failures, that some species, no matter how primitive, had an uncanny ability to resist. They had made enemies of the wrong species before and had barely survived. The council fell silent for a moment, the debate hanging in the air like a thick fog. For a brief instant, The representatives glanced at each other, unsure of what to make of this new perspective. Korak stood tall, his webbed hands gripping the podium in front of him. "I understand your concerns, but Earth is an opportunity we cannot pass up. The humans are not a threat. We will bring them under control and use them to further our own ends. The decision is clear. All those in favor?" The sphere in the center of the room shifted, and one by one votes appeared in the form of glowing symbols. The majority of the council raised their votes in favor of the proposal. The Enkril, the Sivriks, and even the Zothari, despite their reservations, reluctantly gave their consent. The decision was made. The fate of Earth had been sealed. The beginning of the end. The vote had been unanimous, and in the weeks that followed, the wheels of war turned quickly. The Galactic Empire began its systematic invasion of Earth. Their ships, sleek and ominous, descended from the stars like vultures circling their prey. Earth's governments scrambled to respond, but they were no match for the technology brought to bear upon them. Cities were bombarded with precision strikes, their defenses rendered obsolete by weapons beyond human comprehension. The human race had advanced in many ways, but their greatest achievement, space travel, had only reached the edge of their solar system. They were nowhere near prepared for the full might of the galaxy's most powerful species. The Enkral, with their amphibious physiology and unparalleled engineering, deployed fleets of massive warships that swept across the Earth, overwhelming cities with waves of firepower. Their technology was designed to subdue, to overpower, and they were ruthless in their efficiency. The humans had no chance. The Sivriks, whose artificial intelligence had long surpassed organic life forms in many ways, took control of Earth's communication systems with ease. They rewired the global network, severing connections between nations and turning Earth's technological infrastructure into a weapon against its own people. Governments fell one after another, unable to coordinate resistance. Entire cities went dark as the Sivriks sought to suppress any attempt at rebellion. And the Zothari, whose insectoid forms were capable of surviving in extreme environments, scoured the planet for Earth's genetic potential. They took what they wanted, leaving behind a devastated world in their wake. Humanity was now enslaved. They were not killed. No, that would be too simple. Instead, they were bent to the will of their new overlords. Their resources were harvested, their labor extracted, and their world's very environment twisted to suit the desires of their captors. But in the darkest corners of Earth, resistance was already beginning to stir. A small group of survivors, scientists, military personnel, and ordinary civilians, had escaped the initial wave of the invasion. They had retreated into the forests, the mountains, and underground bunkers. They were not many, but they were determined. They would fight back. The spark of rebellion among the rebels was Maya Sutherland, a former military strategist and one of the last high-ranking officers left after the fall of Earth's defenses. She had watched as cities were obliterated, as her fellow citizens were rounded up and enslaved. She had seen the horrors of the alien invasion firsthand, and she knew what was at stake. There was no turning back now. "We've been underestimated," Maya said, standing before a group of survivors in an underground facility hidden deep within the Appalachian Mountains. "The invaders think they've won, but they haven't seen the last of us." A man named David, one of her trusted lieutenants, nodded grimly. "We've got the resources to fight back. The Zothari may have taken our genetic data, but they haven't learned our resilience. We can outsmart them." Maya smiled faintly. "That's the plan. We've got one shot at this. We need to rally every survivor, every hidden group, every person with the will to resist. It won't be easy, but if we can turn the tide, we might just have a chance." The day the invasion began, Earth's skies were painted with streaks of fire. It was a peaceful morning, until the first explosions rattled the air. In the early hours, when most of Earth's inhabitants were still wrapped in sleep, the first waves of alien ships arrived. They were cloaked in darkness, their designs sleek and foreboding, their surfaces glinting with an unnatural sheen. These ships, born from the advanced technologies of the Enslave and their allies, arrived without warning, tearing through the thin veil of Earth's atmosphere with terrifying precision. The global communications grid blinked out. All channels of human contact were severed, leaving people in an eerie silence. Those who had been able to monitor the skies in the moments before the attack described seeing massive vessels, some as large as small moons, breaking through the clouds. The first reports were dismissed as rumors or conspiracy theories. They couldn't have been real, but they were. The Enslave led the charge, their warships releasing smaller dropships that spewed vast numbers of soldiers onto the ground. The Enslave were amphibious creatures, towering and imposing with limbs that rippled with strength. Their black webbed skin gleamed with bioluminescence as they moved with uncanny coordination. Though they had advanced technology far beyond anything humanity could imagine, they were also brutal and efficient, dispatching any form of resistance with swift cruelty. Within hours, the first wave of destruction had begun. Cities were struck by beams of light that turned concrete into dust and steel into molten slag. The airwaves crackled with the sounds of panicked civilians and military officers attempting to coordinate a defense that was already hopelessly outmatched. By the time the governments of Earth had mobilized their armies, the invaders had already struck the heart of the major cities. The most visible initial target was the United States. Washington, D.C. fell within hours of the first bombardment. The White House, the symbol of power and freedom, was reduced to rubble in a single strike. The Pentagon, a fortress in its own right, collapsed under the weight of the alien weaponry. The military's most advanced weapon systems, from fighter jets to nuclear warheads, were rendered useless by the sheer superiority of the Enslave's technology. Any attempt to retaliate only made the invaders more determined. As Earth's military forces scrambled to regroup, the Civrics, the artificial intelligences that made up an entire race, quietly infiltrated Earth's communication networks. They did not need to wage open war. They had other methods of domination. By hijacking satellites and communications channels they severed, the invasion was swift. At first, the alien invaders had no real resistance. Earth's military bases were bombarded, then overrun. Strategic locations were systematically wiped out. Within days, entire countries fell. Canada, Europe, and parts of Asia were brought under control. The skies were filled with invaders' ships, the oceans teemed with Enslave amphibious carriers. The very planet itself felt as though it were suffocating. In the heart of every city, humans watched in horror as their lives unraveled before them. Resistance was fleeting. The few who had weapons were no match for the advanced alien soldiers. Armies fell before the unrelenting assault. Governments sent their desperate last messages, pleading for mercy, for assistance from anyone who could still hear. But no one came. Soon the enslavers began to move in on the surviving population. The first thing they did was dismantle Earth's military and governmental structures, replacing them with their own puppet regime, cruel overseers who would ensure the complete subjugation of humanity. Small groups of soldiers were spared, forced into servitude for their alien masters. Those who could still offer a semblance of usefulness were pressed into labor, their minds programmed to obey, their bodies conditioned to endure. The humans who survived the initial shock of the invasion were left to witness the total collapse of their world. As alien patrols scoured the remnants of the cities, they captured civilians, forced them into labor camps, and separated families. The world that had once been so diverse, so full of culture and history, was now reduced to a place of sorrow. The once thriving metropolises were decimated. Every city became a prison. The Enkril were not content to simply conquer and destroy. They wanted to use the humans. They turned Earth into a factory of sorts, forcing its people to work in the most grueling of conditions. The workers, humans, were no longer treated as living beings but as mere machines, to be used and discarded. Every resource on the planet was now theirs to take, but even in the face of overwhelming oppression, there were those who did not bow their heads to their alien masters. The spark of rebellion. In the remnants of New York City, the rebellion began to take shape. The towering ruins of skyscrapers, once symbols of human achievement, had become the last bastion of resistance. A small band of survivors, military personnel, engineers, and civilians had formed a secret network. They met in the shadow of the ruins, hiding from the watchful eyes of the alien overseers who patrolled the streets. Maya Sutherland, a former military strategist, stood at the front of the room, her eyes focused on the group before her. Her face was streaked with dirt, her clothing torn and stained from the constant struggle, but her determination was clear. She had lost everything, the city, her comrades, her family, but she had not lost her will to fight. "We've been dealt a brutal blow," Maya began, her voice firm. "But we've survived, and now we fight. We have nothing left to lose." There were murmurs of agreement from the others. Some were silent, their faces worn with the weight of what they had lost. They had seen their families taken. Their friends had been murdered. The sky had been filled with fire, and the ground had shaken with the force of the invasion. Yet in their eyes burned the last spark of defiance. "We'll fight them however we can," Maya continued. "They've underestimated us. They think we'll just lie down and accept our fate. But Earth isn't just a planet, it's a symbol, and I refuse to let it fall." David, a former engineer and Maya's closest ally, stepped forward. "We've begun stockpiling supplies. Anything we can scavenge, weapons, food, medicine. We've been able to tap into some of the old military satellites. We know where their supply lines are. We've started small attacks, disruptions, sabotage. We may not have an army, but we have the advantage of knowing this world better than they do." Maya nodded. "Exactly. We're not just going to be a nuisance, we're going to make them regret ever setting foot on this planet." David leaned in, his voice lowering. "The Civrex, they've already begun adjusting Earth's tech to their own needs. They're systematically rewriting everything. Our communications, our satellites, even the power grids. We can't fight them head-on, but we can cripple their operations." "We'll need more than just sabotage," Maya said, her gaze sharp. "We'll need a way to get to the heart of the invasion, the Civrex. If we can get to them, if we can strike at the source of their control over Earth's infrastructure." She trailed off, the weight of her thoughts hanging heavy in the air. The Civrex, while not the most physically powerful of the invaders, were by far the most dangerous. They were digital, everywhere, their influence spreading through every system. If they controlled Earth's networks, they controlled Earth. But how? David asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Maya smiled, a grim determination on her face. "We find a way. One way or another, we fight back. It's our only choice." And so, in the shadows of a dying world, a rebellion was born. The remnants of humanity, once scattered and hopeless, began to unite. They would face the invaders no matter the odds. The spark of resistance had been lit and nothing could extinguish it. The first major attack. In the weeks that followed, small victories were won. Rebels working from hidden bases across the globe began to sabotage alien supply chains, destroy patrols, and infiltrate their camps. The alien forces, despite their overwhelming technological superiority, were starting to feel the sting of human ingenuity. Though the odds were stacked against them, the humans fought with the desperation of a species fighting for its very survival. And as their numbers swelled, so did their hope. Earth, though brought to the brink of extinction, had not yet fallen completely. The war for the planet had only just begun. I hope this gives you a more expansive and detailed second chapter. Let me know if you'd like further expansions or adjustments. The sky above Earth had changed. Once it had been a vast expanse of blue with wisps of white clouds. Now it was a grim tapestry of black, punctuated by the looming silhouettes of alien ships that blocked out the sun. Every day, the invaders tightened their grip on the planet, their technologies systematically draining Earth of its resources. The human population was subjugated, forced into labor, and beaten into submission. Cities lay in ruins, their towering structures mere monuments to a civilization that had once stood tall, now reduced to crumbling memories. Yet as the alien empire tightened its stranglehold, something extraordinary began to happen in the dark corners of the world. The rebellion, though small and scattered, was not defeated. It had survived in the shadows, growing stronger with every passing day. In the face of overwhelming oppression, a new force was rising, a force made up of survivors, of men and women who would not let their world fall without a fight. Maya Sutherland, the former military strategist turned leader of the human resistance, had watched the rise of the rebellion with quiet pride. When she had first stepped into the underground bunker that now served as the headquarters for the resistance, there had been nothing but despair. The streets were littered with broken bodies and broken spirits. But the spark of rebellion had been lit, and slowly, surely it had begun to burn brighter. The resistance's first major victories had been small, nothing more than skirmishes, sabotage, and guerrilla attacks on alien patrols. But now, after months of regrouping, they were ready to escalate. Maya knew that to win this war, they would need to hit the invaders where it hurt the most, their infrastructure. The Enkril, the Civrics, and the Zothari had been too confident in their superiority, too sure that they could crush the humans without any real resistance. But they had underestimated the sheer will of a species backed into a corner. It was time for the humans to strike back in earnest. Maya sat in the war room, staring at the holographic map that displayed Earth's major strategic locations. Across the table, David, her trusted lieutenant, spoke in low tones. He was no longer the hopeful engineer he had once been. The war had taken its toll on him, just as it had on everyone. "We've been sabotaging their supply chains for months," David said, his voice laced with exhaustion. "But we need to do more. The Civrics are spreading their influence across Earth's technological infrastructure, rewiring the power grids and controlling our communications. Without taking them down, we can't make a dent." Maya's brow furrowed as she considered their options. "We need a way to target them directly. Something that will cripple their control over Earth's systems. We can't afford another drawn-out fight. We have to act fast." David nodded. "I've been working on that. A few of the defectors from the Civrics AI units who refused to follow their directives have shared their knowledge. There's a way to bypass their central command network, but it requires us to infiltrate one of their data hubs." Maya's eyes narrowed. "How do we get to it?" David tapped a few buttons on his holographic console, bringing up the schematics of a large spherical structure. The Civrics data hub was located deep within the ruins of what had once been a bustling human metropolis, now abandoned, overtaken by the invaders. It was a fortress, guarded by both physical and digital defenses. Infiltrating it would be nearly impossible. But then again, Maya thought it had never been easy to fight for survival. "We'll need to assemble a team, a small, elite team," Maya said, her voice steady but resolute. "We can't afford to send in a full assault. That would only alert them. But if we move quickly and quietly, we can strike at the heart of their network. If we disrupt their command center, we could sever their hold over Earth." David met her gaze, his face hardened with the understanding of what such a mission entailed. "I'll start organizing the team, but this won't be a simple raid, Maya. The Civrics will fight to the end. And we'll make them pay for every inch they take from us," Maya replied, her voice full of conviction. As David left to prepare, Maya turned back to the map of Earth. She could feel the weight of the decision she had just made. The resistance was fragile. Every mission was a risk. But they had no choice. The time for small victories had passed. It was time to make a stand. The journey to the heart of the Civrics. The infiltration of the Civrics data hub was a perilous mission, but it was their best shot at winning the war. Maya's team was small, just 5 individuals, each one chosen for their unique skills and abilities. They were a mix of former soldiers, engineers, and rebels, all united by a singular goal: to free Earth from its captors. As the team set out toward the data hub, they traveled under cover of night, using the dense forests and underground tunnels to avoid detection. The alien forces, though vast, could not monitor every inch of Earth at once. The humans had learned to move in the shadows, to hide in plain sight. Maya's team was led by Captain Ely Turner, a seasoned veteran of the human military who had lost his entire family to the invaders. He was a man driven by revenge, but his loyalty to Maya was unwavering. His tactical genius had saved the team more than once.